Welcome students and good afternoon and welcome to week 2 of our English 105 class. So in this lecture, I'm going to go over 3 topics. I'm going to go over how to evaluate credible sources, how to write an abstract, and who your audience is going to be when you write a paper. So let's go over the simplest one, audience. So whenever you write any paper, whether it be an academic paper, creative writing paper, you always have to take into consideration your audience. So who is going to be reading your paper? Is it going to be your teacher? If it's going to be your teacher, then you want to write in formal English. And then if you, which is third person case for the most part, if it's going to be your peers, you can write in first and second person case as well as third person case. And if it's going to be beginners, that means that if your audience is a bunch of people who are beginners, you may have to explain some of the technical terms. Or if your audience are all experts, and as I said in English 101, you could just cut to the chase and just get straight to the problem. And so you always have to take it, or if is your audience, do they speak another language? Then you have to correctly translate different terms. So you always have to take into consideration who you're writing for. But no matter who you're writing for, whether it be your teacher or your friends, you always have to have correct grammar and correct good essay structure so that people understand what the main topic of your paper is. So we always take into consideration who we're writing for so that we can maintain the correct tone, we can have the correct language, the correct social register, and all of that. So that's audience. And so when you write your academic paper for this class in English 105, your audience is going to be primarily your teacher. So that means that you need to write in formal English. You write out your contractions. So instead of saying, I don't know, you would say, I do not know, because that sounds more formal. And then you would use third person case, and you would use first person case, but only in certain cases. And then you would use this author thinks if you want to write about yourself in the third person. It's a great way to practice that style of writing. So that's so much for audience. My second topic is how to evaluate sources. So how do we evaluate sources? We use the Kapow method. Kapow. C-A-P-O-W. And so C means that the article that you're looking at is current within 10 years. If it's not current and it's too old, then that article, the information in it, would not be up to date anymore. So the C in Kapow stands for currency, current. A, who is the author of the article? Is the article written by an expert? Is it written by a doctor? Or is it written by an actor or an athlete? So author means that you have to make sure that whoever wrote the article has the credentials to prove that he's an expert in the field. So who would you believe more? Robert Redford, an actor on the environment, or a scientist or a doctor about the environment? So you always want to make sure when you look at a website, when you look at the article, you take a look to see who wrote the article. Usually you can tell by looking at the references and looking at the author background to see who wrote the article. Just like we don't trust what TV ads tell us to do or TV ads tell us to think, because that's not credible. So you want to find credible sources. So far I've gone over C for currency, and within 10 years, A for author, it's got to be an expert in Kapow. P stands for purpose. Purpose means, was this article written as an ad or an advertisement? And so we know not to believe in advertisements, because the only thing the advertisers are interested in is to sell you their product. So therefore, an advertiser would exaggerate the good qualities of their product to get you to buy their product. Some advertisers even lie about the results of the experiments done to prove that their product is, trustworthy. And so we never believe in ads. So you got to make sure that your article is peer reviewed. You got to make sure that the article is not an ad and that the article is from .org, .edu. Some of the .coms is okay, and .gov, which is .gov, .org, and .edu are the most trustworthy of the websites that you can use to find credible expert sources. Also, any source that's in your APU online library is also credible because it's been vetted by the librarians. So anything in your APU that is Azusa Pacific University Library, an online library, is a credible source. And any source that you see on Google Scholar, not Google, but Google Scholar, is credible, as well as peer-reviewed articles. And peer-reviewed articles are simply articles that have been read and vetted by other experts. And you can actually find peer-reviewed articles by going to your search box in your online library. And most online libraries, they have a little checkbox that says, they ask you, after you put in your search words, then they ask you, what kind of articles do you want? Do you want the filter to look for peer-reviewed articles or just regular articles? And so you would check the peer review box, and then you'll get a lot of peer-reviewed articles. So far I've gone over C for currency, within 10 years. A is author, has to be written by an expert. P, purpose, it cannot be an ad, has to be educational. O stands for objectivity. So objectivity means that the whatever source you're using tells both sides of the story. It tells both points of view, the pros and the cons, and that it does not have bias, and that it tells the facts in an objective manner, and it doesn't use weasel words, I guess, to manipulate you into thinking a certain way. So you want something that tells, and I'm going to go over how can you tell something is objective. Something is objective, you can avoid fallacies if it has ethos, pathos, and logos. So I will be going over that in a later lesson. But ethos simply means appeal to credibility, pathos means appeal to emotion, and logos means appeal to logic. So if you have all three appeals in an argument, then you have a sound argument that does not have fallacies or bias. So you have to make sure that the O in kapow means that it's objective and is not biased, non-biased, and that the article that you're reading just tells the facts as it is. So that's O for objective, meaning telling both sides of the story. W means writing style. So writing style means, was the article written in a professional manner? Does the article have sources? Did the author have any grammar, spelling, punctuation mistakes? And does the article have one thesis statement and supporting body paragraphs? In other words, that's appeal to logos, logic. In other words, does it have a credible essay structure to get you to believe in the article? So this is why in ENGL 101, I put so much emphasis on teaching you the writing process as well as the 5-paragraph essay structure to make your paper credible, so that when people read your paper, they'll believe your paper is true and not think that your paper is an ad or that your paper was written by somebody uneducated. Also, writing style also goes for tone. Is it written in third-person case, first-person case, and second-person case? So that pretty much rounds out how you evaluate sources using the kapow method. C for currency, A for author, meaning that it's written by an expert, P, purpose, meaning that the purpose of the article is for educational purposes, O for objective, meaning that the article is written fairly and unbiased and objectively and just states the facts. W for writing style, meaning that it's written in a professional tone, that it has no grammar mistakes, and that it has good essay structure. And that when you look at the website, there are credentials there. So that's how you evaluate good sources, credible sources for your paper. We do not use Wikipedia in our papers because Wikipedia, anybody can upload anything into Wikipedia to make it wrong. So that's why we don't use Wikipedia as a source for our academic papers. I'm going to go into a lot more detail in another lecture, but that's pretty much in a nutshell how we evaluate for sources using Kapow. And last but not least, abstract. What exactly is an abstract? So as you start reading the articles in the database in your online libraries, you're going to notice that they're just going to show you a part of the article. If you go to Google Scholar, once again, they'll show you a 1 paragraph or 2 paragraphs that is a summary of the entire paragraph. That little summary is called an abstract. And so in pop culture, popular culture, an abstract or the summary of a book is usually located at the back of a book, right? And usually when we read a book, any book, you see a little summary at the back. So in pop culture, an abstract is just a summary of the entire book. So you don't have to read the whole thing, and you just read the abstract. And so you're going to learn how to write an APA abstract in order to summarize what you read. And once you understand the parts of an abstract, as well as once you understand the parts of a science paper, this will make it much easier for you to read the scholarly sources in Google Scholar or in the AAPU library. And so I'm going to go over the different parts of an abstract. So when I wrote my abstract, I wrote it the very last thing of my MA thesis. So when you write an abstract, you have to summarize what your entire article, so let's say I write an article about best practices in teaching, and I write an article that's 25 pages long. Well, who has time to read 25 pages? So instead, you would just write a 2-paragraph summary of the entire article, and you put that abstract before the first page of your paper. And so that way the reader can just read the first 2 paragraphs, and then they'll decide, do I want to read the other 25 pages of that paper or not? So an abstract is a summary of the entire research paper. So how do we write an abstract? We write an abstract the same way we would write the same way that I would write a science paper. And so if you're going to write a science paper, you need to first state the problem. So basically when you write an abstract, you have the following parts. You have the background of the problem, you state the purpose, you state the methods, results, and conclusions. So when you analyze the reading, the first thing you have to do is you have to ask yourself, what is the purpose of this reading? What's the main idea of this reading? And then write down in 1 sentence, this article talks about how non-native speakers and native speakers of English converse with each other using grammar and punctuation and conversational turns. And so the purpose of this study is to see what is the best way to teach a foreign language. Should we learn a foreign language from reading a book, from studying from a grammar book, or should we learn a foreign language by watching television? Which is the most effective way to learn a foreign language? So you would write in 1 sentence what the purpose of the study is. So that was the purpose of my MA thesis, was to determine, first you have to have a research question. So the research question was which is the best way to study, to learn a foreign language? Watching television or studying from a grammar book? And so then the purpose would be, the purpose of the study is to determine whether watching television or studying from a grammar book is the best teaching practice for learning a foreign language. Okay, that's purpose. Okay, that's the thesis statement of your article is purpose. Next is methods. So what methods did I use to figure out my research question? And so in methods, what I did, so in methods, you would then, after you read the scholarly article, you would write down what methods did that scholar use in order to find out the answer to his research question. Okay, so what were the methods? So you would say something like, the researcher used methods like she interviewed 100 people, she took a survey, she looked at statistical analysis, so you have to write down what those methods are. And usually when you read a scholarly article, methods is the name of one of the chapters. Because when I wrote my thesis, when I wrote my scholarly paper, I followed the same exact, this formula. I wrote my purpose, I had a chapter on purpose, I wrote a chapter on methods, I wrote a chapter on results, then I wrote a chapter on conclusions. And so basically when I wrote my abstract, which was the very last thing I did, I then wrote one sentence to summarize, okay, the purpose of my paper was to determine what's the best way to study a foreign language. Methods. I actually looked at 2 different videos, and I looked at a video where people were learning a foreign language from a grammar book, and then I looked at a video where people were learning the language just by listening to regular conversation and watching television. I then took the transcripts of these 2 videos, and I wanted to see which way, or whether you're learning it from a grammar book or from television, which one represents the more authentic manner to learn a language. Okay, so you write down, what did that scholar do? Did she look at videos? Did she take a poll? If for example, let's take a totally different COVID-19 vaccine. So how did that researcher, under methods, how did that researcher come up with the conclusion that the COVID-19 vaccine is or is not safe? Then you would write in methods that he went through clinical trials, and he went through and tested 1,000 people of all ages to see whether or not the vaccine is safe or not. So that's basically, so methods is basically, what did that scholar do to prove his hypothesis, okay? And so, hypothesis, his theory. My theory was that for beginners, it's easier for beginners to learn from a grammar book, but for more advanced language learners, it's better for them to learn from being immersed in that country or from authentic television. That was my hypothesis. And then I tested my hypothesis by, that would be methods. So that's, how did I test that hypothesis? I tested that hypothesis by looking at different videos. So that's under methods. How did that researcher conduct his or her experiment? So that's, and I had a whole chapter on methods. Results. So after I conducted my experiment, what were my results? What did I find out about my experiment? What did the scholar learn from doing the research? And so results would be, it's been deemed that such and such a vaccine is not yet safe for public use. More clinical trials need to be done. So that could be results. Or results could be, now that this treatment has been found to be safe for public use, and people under 5 can now safely take such and such a medication. People under 2, they still need more. Anyway, so results is, what did you find out from? So I found out from my experiment that beginners should still learn from a grammar book. In other words, people who are at the beginning level of language learning should learn from a grammar book, while people who are more advanced in their language learning learn best by being immersed in the country itself. So basically, those were my results. In other words, what did I find out from my experiment? What did the researcher find out from his experiment? And then the last part of your abstract is the conclusion. How can we apply all of these, the results to everyday life. And so for, say, the vaccine, you would say, now that this vaccine is deemed safe, anybody can go and take it in order to avoid getting this sickness. No side effects have been, no serious side effects, and therefore it's safe for public use. So go to your neighborhood pharmacy and get vaccinated for whatever it is, okay? So that would be conclusion, is how are you going to apply what you learned from this experiment to real life? And so from my thesis statement, my master's thesis, I would then tell language teachers, okay, if you have a bunch of language students who are very, very low in learning the foreign language, they should study the grammar book. If you have a bunch of language students who already, let's say they already speak the language in the home, like a Spanish speaker who already speaks Spanish in the house or at home, and then come to school just to brush up they already know their Spanish, then for them, the best way for them to further learn their Spanish is to either be immersed in the country or learn from videos. In other words, multimedia, something a little more advanced than just a grammar book, okay? So that's pretty much, I simplified, but you get the idea. And so your abstract will be about 250 words long. That's about 2 paragraphs or 3 paragraphs. And so abstracts range from 2 paragraphs to 2 pages, okay? So that's the range of how long an abstract is. And I think that the abstract that I had for my thesis was 2 paragraphs. But believe it or not, I did that last. Because by the time, usually for the scholar, you write your abstract last. Because by that time, you know your methods, you know your results, you know your conclusions. So you just wrap it up. I remember when I wrote my abstract, and I remember my thesis was due in April 1st. So I think I was working on my abstract March 15th to March 30th. It took me a couple of weeks to write my abstract. That was the last thing I stuck into my paper before I turned it into the UCLA library. And so I think you can still find my abstract. There's the use of scripted and non-scripted video in foreign language teaching. Yeah, that's the name of my master's thesis in applied linguistics. So anyway, getting back to, you're going to be writing an informative abstract. In other words, you're writing an abstract that includes both numbers and description. So if you have any questions, I think that's it for this week. I was just going to talk about credible sources, talk about how to write an abstract, and what audience that you have for your paper. So that's it for week 2. And so for your writing assignment, your reader response, you're going to find sources, and you're going to summarize those sources, and you're going to write an abstract of 3 sources, and you're going to write your reference citation, you're going to write your, and sort of like an annotated bibliography. So for your paper. And this will test whether or not you know how to find a credible source and you know how to write an abstract. So I will go over more of this when I have it all written out for you during week 2. So this lecture just gives you a little taste of what you're going to be doing in week 2. You're going to learn how to evaluate sources by using Kapow. You're going to learn how to write an abstract by summarizing 3 sources that you read, by writing an abstract about them. And then you're going to, and when you write the abstract, you're going to analyze the reading, you're going to write the purpose, the methods, the results, and the conclusion, and try to fit it into 1 page per source. So if you have any questions, and then next week, week 3, I will go over the difference between a direct quote, paraphrase quote, block quotation, and reference citation. So we're going to go all APA next week. So if you have any questions, you can feel free to email me anytime. Let's see if I can, yeah. So feel free to email me anytime.